Stand part.
Mr. Chair.
I call the honourable member Paul Goldsmith.
Now, we come to the third clause of this bill, which relates to the Principal Act, and it says, and I quote, this Act amends the Electronic Transactions Act 2002, the Principal Act. Now, so if we look at the details of the Electronic Transactions Act 2002, brought through this House by the Honourable Paul Swain, and I'd like to pay tribute to him. I used to play with him on the parliamentary side back in the 1990s. He was the left winger, I was the right winger. He wasn't quite as fast, but he was a good man, salt of the earth, and the sort of politician that the Labour Party represents the Labour Party, in my mind, a good man. Now, in essence, and if I look at the third reading speech that he delivered when that bill was passed in October 2002, just to give you an idea of the idea behind the Electronic Transactions Act 2002, which this bill of mine seeks to amend. He says, the bill will allow many interactions with government that are presently required to be in paper form to be done in an electronic form. Because the bill is based on the international standard of the model law of electronic commerce prepared by the United Nations Commission on the International Trade Law, it will make it easier for business to trade electronically. And the bill follows closely the Australian Electronic Transactions Act, and this minimises transaction costs for exporters in our largest export market. So Paul Swain was very pleased, and this bill, that bill was actually passed unanimously. But we had, interestingly enough, supporting the bill and speaking during that debate was the Honourable Richard Prebble, who now is devoted to plotting my downfall in the seat of Epsom. But back then he was the leader of the ACT Party, and he made some interesting comments. On this bill. He noticed that the Electronic Transactions Act 2002 was rushed through this House under urgency by the Labor government. I just wanted to remind people of that. And the concern was, I will come to the relevance, and it'll all become clear, because the concern was at the time, and I quote another voice from the past, Pansy Wong, who you will all recall. Pansy Wong, and she spoke during the debate in 2002 that the minister can mention that the bill will remove uncertainty. I doubt that it will achieve that effect. I'm quoting Pansy Wong, because first I pointed out that Clause 6 states when a person interprets this Act, a reference will be made to the electronic commerce adopted by the United Nations Commission of International Trade Law. But that introduces a lot of uncertainty, because imagine when a dispute arises as to whether an electronic signature is acceptable, whether the electronic document has been received at the time when the sender or the receiver is in dispute. I can just imagine lawyers reaching into the model law of the electronic commerce adopted by the United Nations Commission at that circumstance. She was being ironic at that point. I didn't quite capture the mood of that as I was expressing it, but what she was trying to say was imagine the lawyers reaching into the model law. However, more than that, they can reach a whole raft of documented material that relates to the development of international law. So Pansy Wong at this time was concerned that the Electronic Transaction Act, which was passed under urgency by the Labor government in 2002, was being rushed through, and so there were elements of it that were going to cause trouble further down the line. And one of the areas that she particularly drew attention to, and funnily enough, she was quoting from her colleague Tony Ryle, who I see at the back of the House today, pointed out that because of the language used in Clause 11, an electronically transmitted message may be deemed to have been received by a person on the receiving end. The legislation states that as long as the sender ensures that the message left his or her system and goes to the address given by the receiver, it is automatically assumed that the information would have been received. So the point I'm trying to make is that Pansy Wong was predicting, quoting from Tony Ryle in 2002, that the bill the Electronic Transactions Act of 2002, which was rushed through in urgency, would not deal effectively with some of these issues about the specifics and the details of the manner of the moment of instantaneous receipt, Mr. Chair.
The Honourable Member Paul Goldsmith.
And so 12 years I've had to come along to tidy up the mess that was left by a hurried piece of legislation in 2002. And it's, I don't want to blow my trumpet too far because but I would say that 12 years on, we have dealt with that issue that was left untidy and ineffectively dealt with by that previous government. I just also want to refer also to a mention that was made by a fellow called Paul Adams, an honourable member, he was, from United Future, back in 2002. And I don't think that, well, the relevance is that this is the bill that I am amending, and I'm trying to get an understanding of what the House and the Chamber was trying to achieve through the original legislation, and then from there to understand what needs to change. And but I thought the House might be interested in this contribution from Paul Adams. He said, New Zealand as a nation is ripe to receive positive change. The discerning have picked up on the fact that many New Zealanders are tired of the old systems that are simply no longer relevant to the hour in which we live. For example, today I wear a pink shirt and have coloured my greying hair. Just 20 years ago, if I walked into the House and looked like I do today, I would not have received positive comments. So I believe that in itself shows that I am indeed open to positive change, as are the three ladies in my life, my wife, my two daughters, who heartily approve of the change that they now see. Now, I don't like to be unkind, but I think that may explain why the United Future didn't...
Point of order, the Honourable Clayton Cosgrove.
Mr. Chair, I just draw your attention to the issue of relevance. I can't see for the life of me how the colour of a former member's shirt who was in here, 10 years ago, or his attire, has anything to do with the electronic transactions. But I know the Speaker in the chair is desperate to sort of waylay this as long as he can, but there are limits, sir. I don't think a debate about dress code, even though Mr Ryle has broken the mould and is in the chamber, is in any way relevant to this bill.
Speaking to the point of order.
Apart from that gratuitous comment at the end in reference to the Minister of Health, which had no relevance, I want to point out that the member who is objecting on this occasion is the one who has probably spent most of the last half hour doing his level best to try to distract not only the fine member who's sponsoring the bill, but also many other members. Now, as members are trying to gather their thoughts around what is at times a fairly technical matter, it is important that they are able to retain their train of thought, and the problem is that members such as Mr Cosgrove are doing their level best to distract the member. And so I would just point out that I think he really needs to look at himself if he has a problem with where the member is going.
Thank you. Look, can I just urge all honourable members to play the ball and not the member? Remember that, and we'll preserve an excellent field for the full play of ideas. And I just ask the member to try and speak to the bill. I know he's trying very hard, and I'm listening intensely to what he's saying. But it is important that we debate the issues in front of us, and I understand where he's coming from. The Honourable Member Paul Goldsmith.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Thank you, Mr Chair. I wouldn't like to regard myself as simply a trier. I thought I was achieving the ability of talking about this bill. And what I was trying to get across to the House was that the whole purpose of this bill, which I have had the good fortune to be drawn in the ballot, and also the good fortune to have the support of all members in the House for the last reading stage. And I don't think too many members can claim to have unanimous support for a bill that they have brought into the House only 2 years into a parliamentary career. Well, thank you for pointing that out. But the point I was trying to make was that the Electronic Transactions Act in 2002, which this bill seeks to amend, by going back to the original debate, it is worth reminding us that people were predicting, and I can quote Richard Preble in 2002 saying, when you would draft legislation as loosely as this, I think we're being reckless and irresponsible. And so the point I'm making, that this bill amends the Electronic Transactions Act 2002 because it was flawed, and it didn't give that level of detail and clarity in this area around the acceptance or contract formation of electronic transactions. And that is why I have brought this piece of legislation to the House for its consideration, in the hope that we will provide that clarity upon which the smooth regulation of commerce in this country depends. And that's why, Mr. Chair, I have wanted to make that point. Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
I call the honourable member Chris Tremaine.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.